Imagine your entire civilization trapped in a mountain valley. No escape. Surrounded by walls of iron ore so high, they touch the clouds. For 400 years, your ancestors have lived here as prisoners of geography. The population grows, resources dwindle, hope fades. But then, someone has an idea so audacious it seems impossible. What if we could melt the mountain itself? This is the legend of Ergenekon, the Valley of Iron, and the escape that would forge not just a path to freedom, but the destiny of the Turkish people. The Ergenekon legend stands as one of the most powerful foundation myths in Turkish history. Passed down through generations in the epic traditions of Central Asian Turks, this story tells of survival, ingenuity, and rebirth. According to the myth, a small group of Turkic people found themselves trapped in a remote mountain valley called Ergenekon, located somewhere in the Altai Mountains of Central Asia. The valley was surrounded on all sides by mountains rich in iron ore, creating natural walls that seemed impossible to breach. This wasn't just any setback. The trapped Turks faced complete isolation from the outside world. Cut off from other tribes, from trade routes, from the great steppes where their nomadic ancestors had roamed freely, they were forced to adapt to valley life. Over generations, they developed new skills, new customs, new ways of surviving in confinement. But the knowledge of the free world beyond the mountains never died. Elders told stories of the vast grasslands, of horses running wild, of the sky stretching endlessly in all directions. The legend says they remained trapped for 4 centuries, 40 decades of isolation. Entire lifetimes passed with people born and dying without ever seeing beyond their iron prison. The population grew, but so did the challenges. Limited space, limited resources. The valley that had once seemed like a refuge was becoming a cage. Something had to change. The Turks faced a choice: accept their fate and slowly decline in their mountain prison, or attempt the impossible. They chose the impossible, and their solution would become one of history's most enduring symbols of Turkish resilience and innovation. To understand the Ergenekon legend, we need to step back to the broader context of early Turkic history. The Turkic peoples originated in the steppes and mountains of Central Asia, particularly around the Altai mountain region, which spans parts of modern-day Mongolia, Russia, China, and Kazakhstan. These were nomadic people, horsemen and warriors, who valued freedom of movement above almost everything else. The vast steppes were their homeland, and their entire culture revolved around mobility, horsemanship, and the ability to traverse enormous distances. According to various versions of the Ergenekon myth, the Turks who became trapped in the valley were survivors of a great military defeat. Some versions say they were fleeing from enemies. Others suggest they sought refuge in the mountains during a time of war and became trapped by natural disasters, possibly avalanches or landslides that sealed the mountain passes. Regardless of how they arrived, the result was the same. A proud nomadic people found themselves confined to a single valley. The valley itself, in the legend, was both curse and blessing. It provided shelter, water, and some resources for survival. Game animals lived there. Streams flowed from the mountains. There was enough to sustain life, but not enough to thrive or expand. Most significantly, the mountains surrounding the valley were described as being extraordinarily rich in iron ore. These weren't just any mountains. They were barriers of pure mineral wealth, unworkable by ordinary means. In the technological context of the ancient world, this detail is crucial. Iron was becoming increasingly important, but extracting and working it required tremendous heat and skill. The ancient Turks knew metalworking. They had been crafting bronze and working with metals for generations. But what they faced in Ergenekon was on a completely different scale. To melt through a mountain of iron ore would require not just skill, but innovation on a massive scale. It would require heat beyond what normal forges could produce. It would require cooperation, organization, and generations of accumulated knowledge. Most importantly, it would require belief that the impossible could become possible. The decision to attempt the escape wasn't made lightly. The legend tells us that generations of Turks debated their options. Some argued for acceptance, for making the best of valley life and abandoning dreams of the outside world. Others insisted that the true Turkish spirit couldn't be contained, that they were born to roam the steppes, and that any price was worth paying for freedom. Eventually, the advocates for escape prevailed. But how do you melt a mountain? The first step was organization. Every family, every clan in the valley had to contribute. They began gathering wood from every tree in the valley. Forests that had grown for centuries were harvested. They stockpiled anything that could burn: dried grass, animal dung, fat from hunted animals. They built not just one forge, but many. The valley floor became a massive industrial complex, ancient style. Everyone had a role. Children gathered kindling, women prepared materials, men built the furnaces and forges. The ancient Turks knew that ordinary fire wouldn't be hot enough. They needed to create a blast furnace effect, concentrating heat to temperatures that could melt iron ore. They dug deep pits and lined them with stones. They created bellows from animal hides to force air into the fires, increasing oxygen flow and raising temperatures. They experimented with different configurations, learning from each failure, refining their technique with each attempt. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of Turkish history's most fascinating legends, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what fascinates you most about the Ergenekon story. It really helps the channel grow. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Men died from heat exhaustion. Others were burned working too close to the furnaces. The massive consumption of resources meant less food, less comfort. Children grew up knowing nothing but the sound of hammering and the glow of forges. Entire generations dedicated their lives to this single goal. The valley filled with smoke. The sound of metal on metal echoed day and night. This wasn't just a construction project, it was a civilizational commitment. Failure meant extinction. Success meant freedom. Finally, after years of preparation and failed attempts, the furnaces reached the necessary temperature. The legend describes a moment of collective breath-holding as the Turks focused all their fires on a single point in the mountain wall. They had chosen the thinnest section, the place where they believed the iron was most concentrated, but the barrier was narrowest. Every forge, every fire in the valley was directed toward this one spot. The iron began to glow. First, dull red, then orange, then yellow, then white-hot. The heat was so intense that observers had to stand far back. The mountain itself seemed to come alive, pulsing with energy. And then, incredibly, the iron began to flow. Molten metal streamed down the mountainside like a river of fire. The Turks had done it. They were melting the mountain itself. But melting wasn't enough. They needed a passage. As the iron flowed away, they worked frantically to widen the gap, using their metalworking tools to chip away at the softened rock around the molten iron. It was desperately dangerous work. Men wielded hammers and picks in temperatures that could kill, taking turns rushing forward for brief moments before retreating from the heat. Slowly, agonizingly, a passage began to open. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our documentaries exploring the incredible stories of Turkish history. The legend says that when the passage was finally wide enough, a wolf appeared. In Turkic tradition, the wolf is sacred, a guide and protector. This wolf walked through the newly opened passage and out into the world beyond. The people followed. After 400 years of imprisonment, the Turks emerged from Ergenekon into the sunlight of the open steppes. They brought with them not just their people, but something more. The knowledge of iron working on a massive scale. The organizational skills developed through generations of cooperation, and an unbreakable spirit forged in adversity. They were no longer the same people who had entered the valley. They had been transformed by their ordeal into something stronger. The immediate aftermath of the escape saw the Turks rapidly expanding across Central Asia. The metalworking expertise they had developed in Ergenekon gave them a crucial advantage. They could produce superior weapons and tools. Their organizational abilities, honed through generations of coordinated effort, made them formidable in both war and peace. The legend says they used a combination of these skills to establish themselves as a dominant force in the region. But the Ergenekon legend's impact extends far beyond its narrative of escape. It became a foundational myth for Turkish identity, encoding essential values and beliefs. The story teaches self-reliance. The Turks saved themselves through their own ingenuity and effort. It emphasizes collective action. Individual families couldn't melt a mountain, but a united people could. It celebrates innovation and problem-solving. When faced with an impossible obstacle, they found an unprecedented solution. And it reinforces the special relationship between Turks and metalworking, particularly iron, which would play a crucial role in later Turkish states. The wolf that led them from the valley became one of the most enduring symbols in Turkish culture. The Bozkurt, or gray wolf, appears throughout Turkish history, from ancient tribal standards to modern emblems. The story of emergence from Ergenekon is commemorated in Turkish traditions, and the metaphor of melting iron mountains still appears in Turkish literature and political rhetoric as a symbol of overcoming impossible obstacles through determination and unity. Modern historians debate whether Ergenekon represents an actual historical event or is purely mythological. Some suggest it might preserve memories of actual migrations or episodes when Turkic groups did become isolated in mountain valleys. Others see it as an entirely symbolic story, created to explain Turkish origins and character. The truth likely lies somewhere between, a kernel of historical experience transformed through centuries of retelling into a myth that captured essential truths about Turkish identity and values. What do you think about the Ergenekon legend? Does it represent real history, pure myth, or something in between? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And check out our video on the early Göktürk Kaghanate, next to see what happened after the Turks emerged from their valley. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep exploring history.